Hello everybody, welcome back to ComedIan MTG. My name is Ian. We are here today because I have another gameplay episode for you. Now this is a really fantastic gameplay episode because it came from the first ever ComedIan MTG game day. I like to show my appreciation for the community and for our folks over in Discord by every once in a while having a game day where I'm just available for a portion of the day to be able to play games with patrons, and it's usually a really fun time, and sometimes we get some cool content out of it. In today's gameplay I play with 3 patrons who are pretty active on the channel, and I'm really excited to get to show this game off because it has some unique commanders, one of the most interactive plays I've been in a long time, and just some really awesome gameplay that I'm excited to display here on the channel. Now, if you'll notice with this gameplay, I'm going back to doing fully narrated gameplay. I find that I can actually be way more informative and tell you all, the audience, way more about what's happening in the game, and there are a lot more lessons to be learned. It takes a bit more work, but I think it's very much worth it, and I really hope you guys enjoy. If you prefer this style of gameplay, please comment down below, and if you have the opposite effect, comment that as well. I'm really hoping to get a gauge on what everyone's thinking. Without any further ado, let's jump into the decks for today's game. Let's check out the players in today's pod. My deck for today's pod is Dawnwaker Thrasios. It is helmed by Thrasios and Bruse. The point of this deck came about when Zerd of the Dawnwaker was printed, and I realized it comboed infinitely with both Basalt and Grim Monolith. This very easy to achieve infinite mana combo, combined with a number of other infinite mana combos in these colors, meant for a very explosive and yet simultaneously grindy, powerful mid-range option, which is what I have for you today. The second player in our pod today is Obbyman1. He's playing Vega the Watcher. This deck is basically a Scepter combo deck that goes infinite by drawing your whole deck with Vega on the field if you have Isochron Scepter. There are also a number of other unique interactions, things like Uba Mask with Drannith Magistrate, things of that nature, that allow you to gain a bunch of advantage by having Vega in the command zone. Our third player today is Daryl, also known as Gustav. He's playing Thrasios Kraum. This is a grindy mid-range value deck that seeks to go off with Dockside Extortionist and a couple other combos. The point of this deck is to really accrue as much value as possible, seeing as Thrasios and Kraum are insane value engines in the command zone. And last but not least is MtGG playing Daryl, Hunter of Walkers. This deck is a hybrid Snoop Kiki-Jiki combo deck that seeks to break parity on Daryl's ability of making walkers and drawing a bunch of cards. It's by far the most card advantage I've ever seen in any Gruul option. It's a really interesting and unique deck, seeking to break parity by playing a bunch of Pyroclasms that, 1, trigger Daryl's ability, and 2, allow for a lot of board control. It's a unique list and definitely good in a pod like this where a lot of the decks are creature-based. My opening hand contained a Trophy Mage, a Birds of Paradise, a Verdant Catacombs, an Eladamri's Call, a Fierce Guardianship, a Flusterstorm, and a Fyndhorn Elves. Now, because I was mulliganing down to 6, I actually put my Fyndhorn Elves at the bottom of my library. Birds of Paradise really already covered the mana production I needed. Now, the reason for keeping this hand was that it was a highly interactive, if not a little tight on mana hand. There's a lot of things that my commander can do just by being on the board, basically holding up my Fierce Guardianship for anything happening. Flusterstorm did the same thing. Eladamri's Call also acts as a way for me to go grab a Dockside Extortionist, so I know even though I may be low on lands with this hand, I actually have the ability to go and grab something that can produce a lot of mana despite the fact that I am so tight on mana. So yes, definitely a hand affected by mulligans, but a hand I am happy to keep given a grindy pod is about to show up. Without any further ado, let's jump into this game. As we get things started, we have a Gemstone Caverns for MtGG. I just play my land for turn and get out that Birds of Paradise, hoping to draw my second land soon. Obby's turn just evolves a land and pass, and Daryl tries to slam down a Mystic Remora turn 1, which is unfortunately met with a bit of interaction.
It's a good match.
Despite some sadness, we move on with the game. We have another turn 1 Dork play here from MtGG, and then we go back to me. Luckily, I am able to rip that land off the top of my library, which helps a ton, so I just play Thrasios and hold up that double interaction that you know from my opening hand. Now, as we go over to Avi's turn, he does end up slamming a cursed totem onto the battlefield, which I could not let resolve. I was already choked on mana, my Birds of Paradise could not be cut off, and I needed my Thrasios to be able to grind out of a mulligan. You're going to start seeing from Dayum here a lot of mana production, which is basically the point of the deck, to grind a ton of value with Thrasios. Now, for the same reason that Cursed Totem was unacceptable for my game plan, Daryl definitely comes down and throws a wrench in what I'm trying to do here.
Daryl is like legitimately fucking up my day right now. It's actually kind of funny.
So I decided to pass my turn with the Eladamri's Call up, hoping to be able to grab a creature that will dig me out of the fact that I am now tight on lands and tight on mana overall, and the fact that Daryl can start sniping my creatures out of nowhere if he really wants to handicap me in this game. So I'm thinking about what creatures can really help me get back into this game, especially given the fact that Dayum is slowly running away with it. Now, Million here decides to throw the zombies over to Abi, seeing as he's probably the person who can abuse them least. Now, the Cinderclasm here is definitely interesting, and because I'm first in priority, I'm kind of forced to tap my creature despite the fact that my opponents eventually reveal that they do have interaction. Damping Sphere here actually does slow down this game a healthy amount and stops the combo turns that come later in it. So I grab an Eternal Witness with this Eladamri's Call. My thought process is my creatures are now flimsy because Daryl is on the field, so Eternal Witness can grab me back a fetch land out of my graveyard, and lands are significantly harder to actually remove from the game, and therefore I go and grab lands to be able to create a solid base underneath me for my mana. At this point, we definitely see that the rest of us are just kind of setting up our value engines, trying to get things going. But when it comes to going over to Dayum's turn, the amount of advantage being gained with all of that mana and having Thrasios and Kraum. Now, we see a Submerge here from Dayum, basically to protect the Biomessage Familiar that is going to come down after Daryl gets removed, just to accrue more and more value and basically create a scenario where Daryl has to come down and be there for an entire turn cycle before being able to interact with any more creatures on the board. So after this uncounterable Daryl comes down, we head over to my turn. Now you're going to notice I actually let mana float away at the end of my turn, and that's because Damping Sphere is on the battlefield and basically means that the mana is going to float away anyways because the card would cost one more. But I play Phantasmal Image here to get back my Eladamri's Call. There's some Thrasios activations in the meantime, but my game plan is to grab Kiki Jiki off of this Eladamri's Call because in my hand I actually drew a Deceiver Exarch. So if all goes well, on my next turn I'll be able to combo off with Kiki. You may notice the sequencing of my spells seems a bit strange as I tutor on one person's turn and then attempt to play Deceiver on the other turn, but just reminding you that the Damping Sphere is there, and therefore if I wanted to do everything on the same turn I wouldn't be able to because they all will cost one more due to Damping Sphere's ability. Now, revealing a Kiki Jiki is obviously very scary to some players, so I made it sound like my game plan was just actually to play Kiki and copy the Eternal Witness, getting another tutor, which I think helped dissuade some of the fear towards my next turn, at least until I reveal this Deceiver Exarch in a bit. Now we see a finale for 3 here, and Gustav does a lot of drawing in the meantime. Unfortunately, Million gets Runic Armasaur with his tutor, and that means that I really can't go off because he'll be able to draw basically his entire deck, as I intend to make obviously infinite copies of Kiki Jiki. So I know that with mana open, there's no way that I can fully combo off in a way that will get through him drawing his entire deck. So for right now, I actually just activate Thrasios and try to pass the turn along. So my game plan at this point is to try and find one of my combos that will generate infinite mana and then have Thrasios activations happen after that, so that way I'll at least have my deck by the time my opponents can interact, whereas with the Kiki combo, I don't really have any card advantage, and therefore if my opponents have interaction, I don't have interaction. So I'm trying to find a combo that will allow me to go off, given the fact that there's an Armasaur on the battlefield, and now given the fact that there are actually 2 Armasaurs on the battlefield due to that Phyrexian Metamorph making a copy of Armasaur. You see, Gustav actually makes a really heads-up play here by taking the Armasaur on Abi's side of the board and replacing it with a Gilded Drake. Now Gustav is free to activate Thrasios and only give one other player cards, as opposed to now whenever I activate Thrasios, I give cards to both of them. So now I activate Thrasios at end of turn to try and get some advantage. Interrupting you halfway through this game to remind you to like and subscribe while you're here on YouTube, and remind you to check out our Patreon, where you can get such perks like exclusive access to Discord channels, your name in the show notes, and as you can see, opportunities to be featured in game gameplay like this. I actually draw one of the best cards in my deck, which is a Birthing Pod, and I slam that down here because it is going to allow me to go and get some amazing cards. Now, Dayum tries to dig here to find an answer to it, but it ends up being able to resolve, which is fantastic. So my game plan for this turn is to go grab Dockside with this Birthing Pod and then be able to cast Emil off of Wargate, pulling it out of my deck and go off from there. Now, I know there's a really solid chance that Wargate does not resolve, but that's super okay with me because the fact that I have Birthing Pod now and I can actually pod away a number of my 3-drops onto this battlefield to go grab Emil next turn. Now we're deciding who to attack with the zombies from Obby.
How many cards do you have in hand, Ian?
I only have 4.
I only have like 10. No, 9.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like,
I think
so
swinging at
You're right.
So Dayum correctly gets beaten by about 10 zombies. And because Thrasios is declared as a blocker to save some damage, Daryl actually gets activated here to finish off Thrasios. And that way if Dayum wants Thrasios back on the battlefield, it's going to cost 4. Now here comes probably the most important turn of the entire game, Dayum's attempt to go for it here. As many good turns start off with the Dockside, this one nets about 10 mana as I float 3 of my mana from my own Dockside. We see a Cyclonic Rift here, and now the fight begins. Now, I throw down this miscast because I still have my Flusterstorm in hand from turn 1, and I want to generate as much storm count as possible. I pass to Obby, hoping he'll have something here, and does he ever? He plays Snapcaster Mage, and with holding priority, casts a Flusterstorm, basically ensuring that there are going to be 2 Flusterstorms coming down in the Cyclonic Rift. Now, it's met with the Veil of Summer, but I have a Flusterstorm of my own to counter the Veil of Summer. So now my Flusterstorm resolves, countering Veil of Summer. Flusterstorm number 1 hits, and it gets paid for. And now Snapcaster Mage comes in, targets the Flusterstorm that is now in Obby's graveyard, and allows for a Cyclonic Rift to finally be countered after all of that. Now, Obby made a really heads-up play there of being able to cast the Snapcaster first to generate even more storm. A really well-sequenced turn, and even the backup plan of bouncing the sphere gets stopped.
The only scenario I imagined myself losing was multiple Flusterstorms. 3?
3.
Now I am in a fantastic position to win this game, and knowing that, Million on his turn goes out of his way to kill my Deceiver Exarch so the Kiki line will not work. As Daryl is being activated, he's actually also gassing up Gustav's hand so that he can interact with me as well. Luckily, this deck has multiple avenues to victory, and especially with the Birthing Pod on the battlefield, I'm feeling pretty confident going into my turn. As I mentioned, I'm kind of interested in trying out the Zerda Monolith combos, so the first thing I do is play the Trophy Mage that I've had in my hand since turn 1. With this in pod, I can go grab either Kinnan or Zerda and make infinite mana, but I'm met with a Pyroblast. I now know I can go pod if I play Kiki and go grab Felidar Guardian with the pod.
I'll try to force will it.
Jesus fucking Christ, guys. With 2 win attempts in the bag, I know that I can still go and grab Emil off of this Birthing Pod and make infinite mana. The trouble is I have to use an activated ability, meaning both Gustav and Million are drawing cards. Now, these first activations are the scariest because that's when they can draw interaction. However, at a certain point, I can start flickering in response to any interaction they pull. And then at that point, I'll have infinite mana and I can start drawing cards with Thrasios and still reacting to anything they attempt to do, even though I am activating an ability, because I'll be able to have infinite activations or infinite mana available. So at a certain point, my opponents realize there's not much they can do. At this point, I shortcut to show them picking up my library and dropping a Blind Obedience on the battlefield, basically demonstrating that I will be able to create a loop with something like Emil and Eternal Witness and be able to recur all of my spells, and with Blind Obedience on the battlefield, I'll be able to pay the extort cost on each and every one of them and drain them all to death. Well, thank you for watching this gameplay episode here on ComedIan MTG. If you liked it, make sure to hit that like button, and if you want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe and actually hit that little bell icon, and that'll give you notifications whenever we post new stuff. I'm really enjoying trying to go back to this narration style gameplay. As I mentioned, it's a bit more work, but I find it much more rewarding as I'm able to teach lessons and go through gameplay and be able to bring up lessons that can be learned from most cEDH games. If you like this style, as I mentioned before, comment down below. This also was a fantastic game with some amazing interactions. Have you ever had a play as crazy as that triple Flusterstorm play? If you have, leave it down in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. And reminder that in the ComedIan MTG Discord, we are doing Brutal Combat, a brewing competition in which we try to brew around a commander as a Discord, and everyone submits a deck list to me. The winning deck list gets to be featured on the channel in a gameplay episode, and I'm super excited to have that happen, being played against a bunch of different meta decks. This time around, the competition is going to feature Scion of the Dragon, and the game plan has to be that it tutors up one of the Elder Dragons from Strixhaven. So everybody get your brewing caps on, as that competition will last until the end of April. All right, everybody, with all that out of the way, have an amazing week. Peace.